Hello everyone, this is the video for week 4 in which we're going to cover 4 of the most important parts of the English language. The first one is the verb to be. Well, the verb to be is the most frequently verb used in English, is the first verb that we teach, and we do so because it helps us practice a lot of vocabulary. We can talk about occupations, feelings, descriptions, and locations just by using the verb to be. Also, the most irregular verb in the English language is the verb to be. And as you see there, is the most inflected verb. What do we mean when we say inflected? Well, it refers to the different forms that the verb could have. So as you see there, you have am, is, are for present, was and were for past, been for the present participle, and been for the past participle. What are some of the most common mistakes that English language learners make when learning to use the verb to be? Well, the first one is using the wrong form of the verb. Okay, so you is my friend. Another one can be omitting the verb to be. He is my favorite teacher. The other one, which is very common for Spanish speakers, is to use have instead of be to describe states and ages. So he have hungry instead of he is hungry. And another very common mistake that we still make in intermediate levels is to omit the subject. So we say it's raining, is raining instead of it's raining. Another way to understand the verb to be is if we compare it with Spanish. Okay, the verb to be in English has two forms in Spanish, ser and estar. These two forms become one when we teach English, and sometimes students have a difficulty with that. Some expressions used in English with to be are used with have in Spanish. Yo tengo hambre, él tiene 8 años, as we saw before. Verb forms are conjugated in Spanish according to the subject. Okay, this is one of the biggest limitations for people learning Spanish. The conjugation of the verbs according to the subject pronouns is something that becomes very difficult. And most of the times we omit the subject pronoun. So you say me gusta or es muy bonito. The second grammar key is the verbs used to express present time. Okay, when we talk about the present tense, there are 4 different forms. We have the simple present tense, the present continuous, the present perfect, and the present perfect continuous. Okay, each of them has different uses, and the book clearly states them. What are the mistakes that most ELL learners make? Well, let's look at the first one. Laura eat cookies for breakfast. They don't add the S when they have he, she, or it. The other one, the pilot flies every day to New York. They forget the spelling rules. I am watch the soccer game. So what they do is they include the verb to be. Another one, we prefer the food for tomorrow's lunch. They use the simple present to talk about something that is going to happen in the future. So the present continuous is the one that should be used for that. Then I am going to school every day. To talk about routines, we use the simple present, not the present continuous. The cat is sleeping outside. They're missing the verb to be when using the present continuous. Then the spelling of ing forms, cutting, stepping, planning, helping, opening. Some of them you forget to double the letter, and in other ones you double the letter unnecessarily. And finally, we have I am liking the mood. There are verbs that are called stative verbs or non-action verbs. And these verbs do not indicate an action, so they do not take a continuous form. Other mistakes made, I eaten many cookies from that jar. If you're using the present perfect, then you shouldn't forget to use have. I have eaten many cookies in the jar. The mechanic has fixed the car. Wrong past participle, the plane has arrived on time. We be reading the story in class. You're missing the have. I am baking cookies since 9 a.m. There's a wrong verb tense. Remember that when we have since, we are going to use the present perfect. The dog no bark at night, very common. You take it from Spanish, el perro no ladra. The dog no bark, the dog doesn't bark at night. The baby is not eat, okay, the baby does not eat this food. The soup doesn't smell, sometimes we forget to take off the S. And she doesn't has cleaned the room. We forget that we don't use the auxiliary doesn't when using the present perfect. If we compare the use of present tense verbs with Spanish verbs, we're going to find that the English present perfect can be turned into present, into past, or to present perfect in Spanish, depending on the meaning. Spanish has a future tense and we can also use be going to as English does, but simple present tense is used with an appropriate future adverbial. And look at the example, yo te llevo si ocupas un ride. Okay, so we're going to have a simple present tense with a future adverbial to talk about something that's going to happen in the future. The verbs are conjugated for every subject. We talked about this. Subject pronouns are usually omitted. Está lloviendo, voy a mi casa. So we don't mention them, and that's kind of difficult. When in English, you always have to include the subject. The third key that we have is the verb tenses to express past time. So we're going to have different forms also. We're going to have the simple past. We're going to have the past continuous or past progressive. We're going to have the past perfect and the past perfect continuous. Each one of them, as you know, has different uses, and there are formulas to construct each of these forms. What are some of the errors? Well, for example, look at the first one. She was studying for the test. Okay, when we have was, we need to add ing to the verb. So she was studying for the test. I opened the door, then I was letting you in, using the wrong verb tense. This is two actions, one happened after the other. So I opened the door, then I let you in. Spelling rules of ing verbs, we saw these ones already. Doubling the letter or not doubling the letter. Using ing forms with non-action verbs, the verbs that don't express an action. Then look at this one, she done her homework. We're forgetting there the auxiliary had, so she had done her homework. Then the other one, conjugating the verb have incorrectly. I have already finished the book. I had already finished the book if it were in past. They had read that story yesterday. So if we're using yesterday, we cannot have a present perfect form, a past perfect form there. Sorry. So we need to include that form there. I studied at ULACID since 2014. This since indicates that you have to use a perfect tense. Jim had kicked the ball very hard, wrong past participle. When the eruption started, I was outside for 2 hours. This option of for 2 hours indicates that it's an action that went on for a period of time. So I had been outside for 2 hours. She had been waiting, don't forget the been, and he was preparing dinner for 2 hours when the pizza arrived. Wrong verb tense again. He had been preparing dinner for 2 hours when the pizza arrived. English and Spanish. Well, in Spanish, again, the present perfect can have 3 different forms. Present past or present perfect in Spanish, according to the specific kind of present perfect. That is, whether it refers to a current situation or a completed one. In English, we have just one present perfect with different uses. In Spanish, we have different verb tenses to express that same thing. The endings of verbs could change according to the subject. We conjugate verbs, and subject pronouns are usually omitted. The last key is verb tenses to express future time. And in English, we have the will and be going to. What are some of the mistakes? Well, forgetting the verb to be. Laura is going to watch that movie. They are going to hide, forgetting the to. Luis is going to runs with me, adding an extra S that is not needed. The children will to do their homework, very common. The children will do their homework. Mary will cleanse the house, putting S again. And after they will have the test, we will go for lunch. This one refers to adding a future verb tense, a future expression in a clause of time. And we don't do this. We say after they have the test, we will go for lunch. So we're never going to have a future form in this part of the sentence. What are some of the similarities or differences with Spanish? Okay, Spanish has only one future tense indicated by verb endings. In English, we have two. We have will and be going to. The endings vary according to the subject. Spanish can also use be going to for the future, but in Spanish, we use the present tense of go. So we say, yo voy a ir al cine. In English, say, I am going to go to movies. Simple present tense is used with a future time adverbial, very common. Saprissa juega mañana, Heredia juega en la tarde. So we're using a simple present tense verb with a future indicator. And subject pronouns are usually omitted. If you see, whenever we talk about verbs, what we have is that verb tenses are conjugated, subjects are omitted, and there may be different forms. And that's what you need to consider when you teach these things to your students. Well, we got to the end. This is the summary of the verb tenses. Remember that if you have any questions, you should bring them to class, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Bye.